You can all remember to mute too as well if you're not speaking at any given moment. Thank you so much. So NJCH offers grants and other kinds of awards to cultural organizations and institutions. We provide direct programming, often thematic, to different audiences, and we convene and connect entities and individuals that are interested in cultural and civic life throughout the state. Fueling community journalism through NJ Community Colleges is part of a program portfolio called Informed NJ, which funds, creates, and amplifies humanities grounded programming that raises media literacy and expands support for local journalism. Over the past 2 years, our support for local journalism has taken a number of forms. We provided direct funding to a South Jersey initiative called Stories Invincible, a restorative narrative project that connects citizen journalists and media makers from around the city of Camden. We collaborated with the Community Foundation of South Jersey and Journalism and Design to develop our own community reporter training workshop series, which ran through June 2022 and trained 20 community members from 6 South Jersey towns in the basics of local news. And Cole will talk to all of you a little bit more about that program in a bit. And we recently launched this new program for community colleges, with support from the New Jersey Civic Information Consortium. What's important for you all to know, I think, today is that we offer a range of funding types and amounts of support for local news in New Jersey. And we do expect that this will be a funding priority for us into the foreseeable future. Cole, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking on the background here. So as Valerie mentioned, I'm from Journalism plus Design at the New School. So we're based in New York, but we have a national program. Oh, and this is the democracy. Wait, I think I skipped a slide here. I have a national program called Community News Networks. And I want to give a shout out to my colleagues who are also on the call, Megan Lucero and Andrew Calderon, who may not be here right now, but he may join us at some point, we're all working together on this project where essentially we're working with community colleges around the country as hubs for local news and information. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But for us, it's really about partnering with colleges to expand access to journalism education and opening up new pathways for more people to participate in acts of journalism. So not necessarily just to equip people with journalism skills to go get a job in a newsroom, but by sharing more of the tools and skills of journalism and storytelling and media, that we can increase media literacy in our communities and basically facilitate the strengthen the flow of high quality information in our communities. So that's really about what our project, the Community News Networks initiative, is about. We're working in New Jersey, Philadelphia. I'll talk a little bit more about that one, Cleveland and Oakland, California as well. So several different places. I think you already talked. Do you want to talk a little bit more about this program, Valerie, or?
Feel free. I mean, we did it together, so you can.
Oh yeah. Oh right.
Thanks.
So a little bit of the genesis here. Like we started working with Valerie and the New Jersey Council of the Humanities a little more than a year ago, and this was a project called Democracy and the Informed Citizen, where we basically created a series of workshops for people in 6 South Jersey communities to learn the tools of journalism and storytelling that we called the Community Scribes program, and that we led 4 virtual workshops that were kind of rooted out of some of the curriculum that we created at Journalism and Design, which introduced folks to just journalism fundamentals, the basics, and also where we come from as a program, our pedagogy is really rooted in design. So design practices, design thinking, human-centered design, and systems thinking. So there were a lot of different ways that we were really looking at how do we think about how local news and information communities, and how do we kind of all play more active roles in making sure that our community has the information that we need to stay informed, engaged, and empowered. Out of that workshop series, we got feedback from one of the participants who said, "Oh, this should be a certification." And Valerie and I were like, "That's a great idea." Turns out we were already working on something like that with other colleges. So that led us to essentially go to the New Jersey Civic Information Consortium. And we applied for a grant there, where we got a grant that's funding all of the work that that is fueling the call for applications. And if you're not familiar with the Civic Information Consortium, definitely look into the great work that they're doing and fueling throughout New Jersey. really rooted in just basically expanding access to high quality information in our communities, fueling this like grassroots approach to journalism and really reimagining what local journalism can look like. So there's a lot of really, really exciting stuff happening in New Jersey across the board. A lot of it's being fueled and funded by the Civic Information Consortium. So we're really grateful to them to be able to have the support to launch this program and to actually make good on that feedback and create what we call, what we're trying to create is these non-credit certificates in community journalism with colleges in New Jersey. So that's a little bit of the context here.
Sure, thanks, Cole. So one of the things we want to go over today is the high-level program goals for this. Cole talked a little bit about the genesis of this program, but there are a few things that we really want all of you to be thinking about as you're trying to envision the role that your particular colleges will play, not just in this program, but in the local news ecosystem more broadly. So the first goal is expanding access to journalism education. All of you know very well that community colleges are some of the most dynamic, innovative, and yet underserved and underrepresented institutions in higher education. And we really see the community colleges as an essential pipeline to expanding access to journalism education to people who can't afford or don't want to go to J school, may not have access to the kinds of internships and other opportunities that are typically gateways into journalism, and to get people who aren't necessarily interested in making a career out of journalism, as Cole was talking about earlier, get them thinking about other ways that journalism feeds into their professional lives and just their civic life. So that's the first one. Second one, support greater media literacy. I think one of the things that came out of our Community Scribe program, and indeed I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it already, is this question that in this huge information deluge that we all have to grapple with daily, how do you figure out what sources are newsworthy? How do you figure out what sources can be trusted? And so we really consider supporting a greater media literacy as part of what we do. Not only it's important for individuals, but when it's done collectively, it also supports just a healthier news ecosystem, right? Because you get people who then are receiving their news and ultimately producing news that is credible and trustworthy, which benefits us all. So that's the second goal. Third goal, creating pathways for more people to get involved in local news. This is related somewhat to the first one, which is that you don't need to be a reporter, you don't need to be a journalist or a media maker in order to be involved in your local news scene. Whether you're writing an op-ed, a letter to the editor, whether you're writing an op-ed, or whether you're just really getting curious about how people get information in your particular community, and you're starting to think about, when someone comes to a town for the first time, they move in or they're trying to get acquainted with the community, where do they go to figure out the ins and outs of the community? How do they get the key information that allows them to live their lives, to be productive, engaged citizens? And that benefits, of course, their neighborhoods, their neighbors, their surrounding communities, and then ultimately the state as a whole. So we see this program as really an opportunity to create pathways for people to get involved in local news in a multitude of ways. And then finally, this is a crucial one for all of you who are here as representatives of community colleges. We really see community colleges as hubs for local news and information. One of the things I talk about frequently is how the nature of the ways that people are using cultural and civic institutions in New Jersey is changing rapidly, right? The way that people engage with libraries has changed. The way that people engage with museums and historic sites has changed. Community colleges are really no exception to that. And I think we're really interested in the relationship between sort of the decline of conventional local news outlets, right? Those small papers, those small sites that used to be kind of the juice, so to speak, for local news. How the decline of those kinds of institutions is playing into the shifts in how people are using cultural and civic institutions like the ones that we serve at NJCH. And as I was saying earlier, community colleges play a unique role in this because you have access to a fascinating pipeline of students because your mission is to serve your surrounding communities. And because so many of your institutions have faculty that are incredibly innovative, incredibly community engaged. And our thought is, well, why not marshal all of that terrific energy in the service of local news and information?
If you're there, that's fine. If not, then
Those are the key program goals.
okay. Thank you for that. I'm sorry.
And then, I think if you're talking, oh yeah, there we go. I think that person. So just to give you kind of a sense of what this looks like. So again, this call for applications is really specifically rooted in helping colleges create certificates in what we call community journalism. And we we've already done a version of this. So we have an example of what it looks like, and we're really excited to work together with colleges in the state to kind of take this to the next step. So we originally partnered, journalism and design partner with the Community College of Philadelphia about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And we created this new certificate called Community Journalism Civic Power. And it was really about introducing people to the tools of journalism, the kind of basic ethics of journalism, and really talking about how we could reimagine what local news looks like if it was really centered in the needs of our communities, right? So it was a 6-week workshop series where it was all virtual, open to anyone, totally free. And we had about 40 plus people. We did 2 versions of it, about 40 people in each version of the course. We awarded about 40 certificates total. So a lot of people, a super diverse group of folks who showed up for each of these sections that we led. And I'll show you the kind of the curriculum here as well, just kind of a screenshot. But we had everyone from like a young community college student to 60-year-old, 70-year-old community organizers to a guy who worked in the communications department at City Hall and deals with journalists all the time and didn't actually know what journalists do. So a lot of really interesting, just an intergenerational like mix of backgrounds. It was really cool to see people coming together, this idea around local news and media and storytelling. We open sourced the curriculum, which you can see on the screen right now. And it's linked in the call for applications as an example. So you can kind of see the foundational curriculum that we're working from. And we basically have this to kind of build on, and we want to work with folks to be able to expand, apply this to your own college, right? To create your own certificate in community journalism, build on your own expertise. And so we have a good starting point and some learnings from this, from previous iterations that we've done, and this example from the Community College of Philadelphia.
Okay. So now we're going to go over exactly what these awards offer to your college. So I think the first thing to note is that whichever colleges are selected for this program, and they're going to be 3 in total in this pilot round, right? So 3 from across the state out of the 18 colleges in the state. We're giving grants of $40,000 in funding per institution. I can talk a little bit later about how exactly that's broken down. But roughly, we're asking you to allocate $10,000 to support the costs for the faculty who will be trained in running this program, $10,000 for programmatic administration. We all know that it could be expensive to run these programs and to get communications, outreach, et cetera, up and running at your institutions to support this. So that's where that bucket of money will go. And then an additional $20,000 that will essentially be used for development funds once you have successfully completed the first version of this program and run it through spring 2024. This will be a chance for the selected colleges themselves to think about what kinds of community partnerships, whether they're with grassroots organizations, whether they're with local media organizations, state media organizations, how they want to continue those partnerships beyond the immediate life cycle, right, of this award. And these funds will help the colleges do that. We can discuss that, like I said, in a little bit more detail. Cole is saying, we already have a foundational curriculum in place. It's tried, true, and tested, right? Which is, of course, the best kind of curriculum to have for something like this. And we're going to have support for then whatever colleges are picked to then tailor the curriculum to college and community needs, right? When we were designing this program, we worked with a number of faculty members from community colleges around the state. We worked with some administrators from community colleges around the state. And one of the things that we heard over and over again is that obviously, as wonderful as the foundational curriculum is, it's not necessarily going to be able to speak to the individual college's needs and circumstances. You know, you all work in this space. Many of you have been in it for a really long time. And you all realize, I think, that your colleges are incredibly diverse and different in how they approach communications and media, if they have programming for it at all, but also in terms of how you all situate yourselves in your communities, right? How your institutions function in your communities. And so allowing some flexibility and your input involved in this process of developing, you know, curricula for your specific institutions, that's a really important element of this program. Opportunities for peer learning and collaboration. NJCH has run a number of different community college-oriented programs over the years. I know that some of you on this call have been involved in NJCH's previous community college work. So you know that one of the things that we love to encourage is cohort-based learning, right? This is not just an opportunity to learn from the media experts who are going to be involved and partnering with your colleges to do this program, but also from each other. And so as part of the program, we will do cohort meetings on a regular basis and think together about, you know, sort of what are the learnings from all of our institutions? What are the commonalities? Where do we diverge? And how can that inform then how these partnerships may look in the future? How does that inform different responses to local news? And then ultimately, equally important, are the collaborations that the selected colleges are going to build with those community organizations that I was talking about before. And finally, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, we're going to offer additional funding for partnerships that help participants apply their skills. That refers back to that $20,000 bucket, right, in the funding. So we're going to have additional money for, you know, each college to build out partnerships that will allow people who go through the training to not stop, right, just with the trainings, but to continue on and to think about sort of what are ongoing pathways into doing this work. And that goes for both opportunities outside of the college, outside of the community colleges, but also different pathways, right, within the institutions themselves. And we can talk a little bit about why we made this program non-credit versus credit and how we see it fitting into some of your existing credit.
And just wanted to quickly emphasize too, you don't have to have a journalism program to apply for this. We're agnostic to whether or not, you know, if you have one or don't, like an official journalism program. At the Community College of Philadelphia, they don't have, you know, there's no journalism department. They have a student newspaper, which was great. We got a lot of students and participants from the newspaper and the certificate that we led. But, you know, we think that this offering actually, you know, could add value. You know, we're interested how it might add value to folks in institutions that don't currently have a program. Obviously, there's a lot of expertise for those of you who do, and we're really excited to collaborate on both sides, or just across the spectrum of, you know, how, you know, these types of skills or classes may or may not be offered. And I think that's really important for us to think about, you know, especially if you do offer some kind of journalism related programming at your school. How the certificate could be complementary to that, right? To be something unique that, and we would work together to figure out how to go about doing that. So I wanted to emphasize too the flexibility of this, as Valerie was mentioning, like we have a foundational curriculum that we can kind of work from, but we also want to defer to your expertise. Like, you know the needs of your community. You have, you know, a lot of, you know, institutional expertise, personal expertise. So we would build that together and make sure that whatever we created, you know, was you know, beneficial to your college. And again, like a lot of this is, you know, building those incentives are really about creating those pathways. So if you do have a journalism program, for instance, we're collaborating with Laney College in Oakland, California. They have a great journalism program. We're going to launch a certificate together because they want to get more people into that program. And they see this as kind of an entry point to maybe getting more students who might be really interested in pursuing journalism as a career. So a lot of different ways to think about this. I just wanted to emphasize that, you know, as we get going, that you know, we've collaborated a lot with like English departments and you know, all sorts of folks. So so that's not required, and we want to work with any college, regardless of your journalism programming. Just to kind of quickly running down the timeline here. So the deadline, May 26th. So, you know, we got about another month here for applications are due. Then just to kind of go through the actual process, as Valerie mentioned, we've worked with an advisory board that's a diverse mix of folks who represent everyone from community college faculty and administrator to folks who work with community-based journalism organizations who have run similar types of training programs, to a student, a community college student. Lots of folks who really helped us shape this program. They are going to be our reviewers. So once applications come in, we have a review process where they will go through all the applications and evaluate them. And we have an evaluation framework that we will share as well. So that happens in early June, late June. We will notify the 3 folks who will receive the awards that we'll work with. Oh yeah, and then that's kind of the application timeline. And then just so you know kind of what to expect, for colleges that are selected, beginning in July, we will host at least 2 in-person workshops to go over kind of the curriculum that we have available and to start developing what your program would look like, right? So building off what we already have and what would make sense, for your school. So we'll do those in person. We'll host a couple of these. Like it'll be a good opportunity for us to meet each other and really think about the curriculum that we're offering and start to really shape what this program will look like. Starting in the fall, we'll work with the colleges to kind of start this process with their administrations, right? Get the certificate approved. I know each school is probably different. There's some similarities, obviously, across the system. But so we're here to support in any kind of administrative requirements that might be necessary, and this can look different depending on your school. I want to say we have an idea around the non-credit and what the certificate is like. It could look like a lot of different ways, so we can be adaptive to what it looks like for your institution and how to work with your administration. And I'll also mention too, as Valerie was talking about, the community partnerships. One thing that's really key as we think about colleges as hubs for news and information is those community partner and media partners. You can say community, we could be a media partner, but not every town has unfortunately like a local newspaper anymore, as we talked about local news deserts. So we can think about basically what we want to create is opportunities for folks who do participate in this type of programming education to then have a pathway to participate in some way. So I'll give you an example of what that looked like in Philadelphia. We partnered with an organization called Resolve Philadelphia, and they support collaboration among media partners in Philly. And they have a really great program called the Info Hub Captains, where they pay community members to help them co-create a print community newsletter that they mail out to neighborhoods across Philly. So everybody who participated in our certificate program had an opportunity to go then work with Resolve and be a part of their Info Hub Captain program. So they got paid stipends to then build this community newsletter. That's the kind of thing that we're thinking about. That's just an example. It can look like a lot of different things depending on what the kind of civic and media infrastructure in your community looks like and what the potential partners might be. We can also help, again, thinking about the Civic Information Consortium and the vast network that they have built of media partners across the state. So we can also help you identify folks who could be potential partners and create those opportunities for folks who participate in your programs. But we'll start to do that in the fall. And then later in the fall, really develop those thinking about recruitment, right? So how are we going to get people to participate in the programs? We'll develop the materials. If there are any kind of informational events or things that we want to host, we'll start doing that. And then next spring, launch your program. So this timeline is flexible, especially that launch time, just depending on, since this is, we geared this to be non-credit, it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to kind of the academic calendar. Sometimes you might want that. It really depends on kind of your school and your, how, what the best, kind of timeline is. So, but we ideally, are aiming for that spring 2024 to be kind of like the launch by, right? You could even do it earlier. Hey, you can launch it in the fall if you want to kind of go. So, but that's kind of the general timeline that we're looking at. And I will say, as I know Valerie's typing in the notes, if you have questions, you don't have to wait for the Q&A. If you have a question, you can go ahead and throw it in the chat and we'll get to it at the end as well. So as questions come up, feel free to toss them in the chat and we'll get to them as we go.
Yeah, thanks, Cole. I'm also dropping a lot of links into the chat so that you can follow along and look up more information about the various programs, institutions, et cetera, that we're mentioning at your leisure. Right now, I'm going to drop in a link to the application itself. That application is also available, as some of you may have seen, as a PDF on our Call for Applications website. If you haven't looked at it already, I encourage you to do so as soon as possible. You're going to be ultimately filling out the application for this program through NJCH's online award and application system, which is called Founded. Many of you have applied for NJCH funding before, or at least people from your institutions have. So a lot of you are familiar with Founded. For those of you who aren't, you'll have to go to the Founded website, set up an account in order to apply on behalf of your institution. And if you need assistance at any point with doing any of that, just please reach out to us. More than happy to help you. All right, so the application components. We tried to make this application, a mix of being thorough, but also being brief. We know what it's like. Cole and I, both work for organizations that receive funding from foundations, from the federal government. And so we really sympathize when a funder has an arduous application process, when they have arduous reporting requirements. And we're very keen on lowering the barrier to application and entry in our programs. And we strive to really make our applications reflect that. At the same time, those people who will be evaluating your applications, the advisory board in this case, need enough information to go on, right, in order to make the appropriate judgments. So it's always a mix. When we designed this application, we thought first about the people who are involved. Who is going to be doing the work? You will need to designate a project director as part of this program. That project director is going to be the person who will liaise with NJCH and J&D and have ownership essentially of the project on your campus. That person does not need to be a faculty member. We mentioned this in the instructions, but I think it bears repeating. It just needs to be someone who is formally affiliated with the college. You will also need then to designate an alternate project director. We know that things happen sometimes, leaves, whether unplanned or unplanned, occur, and sometimes people's resources and capacities shift within an institution, especially within a community college institution. We know that all of you are asked to do so much for your students, for your colleagues, and so we want whoever applies to designate an alternate in the event that the main project director is not able to continue running the program. There will also be space in the application to supply the name of the faculty member whom you think is going to be the trainee. This will be the person who will be trained in the curriculum that Cole was describing earlier. If you don't know who that person is yet, and you may not, especially if you're in an institution that doesn't have any kind of journalism programming, that is absolutely totally fine, and it will not count against you in the application. If you do have somebody, though, in mind, please list them in the appropriate spot in the application. Next, institutional information. This section is rather stats heavy, and we want to get a sense of your school, your students, and your staff. It asks for some pretty basic institutional information about your size, how many full-time, part-time students do you have, what do your staff sizes look like, full-time, part-time staff, really getting a snapshot of your faculty. And then I think most importantly of all, getting a sense of the people whom your colleges serve, right? We ask for some demographic information about your student, as well as first generation status and a couple of other elements that we think are really important to know as we equip our judges with the chance to try to suss out which colleges are going to be the most viable in terms of reaching populations that do not typically have access to these kinds of programs. So that's one reason we included this institutional information section in the app. Next component. Narrative. The narrative section is key, absolutely key for this. You need to make a convincing case for why your community college is the best possible partner for this work. And that really encompasses sort of two main areas. I think one is obviously your interest. Why on earth do you want to bring this program to your community college? What do you intend to get out of it? What do you see your students and your colleagues getting out of this program? How will it shape and reshape your college's place in the community? The narrative is a place to articulate all of that. Corollary to that is then why is your college particularly well suited to doing this work, right? You can have an interest in it, but you may not necessarily be suited. We hope that all of you are. We hope that you can make a convincing case about why you're suited to do this work. I want you to think about the different resources that your college has that would connect to the certificate's themes. You know, for some of you, that's going to be journalism programming explicitly, but we want you to really think expansively about the kinds of programs, structures, et cetera, that can be used to answer this question about, you know, sort of what makes your campus suitable. And that includes a lot of different departments and disciplinary backgrounds, you know, not just journalism. That includes experiential learning centers, that includes workforce development centers or work in your institution. So really think creatively about that, particularly if you're an institution that does not have any or a lot of journalism programming in a formal way. Answered part of this question already, but there is a specific section in the application that does a deep dive into your journalism programs if you have them. So it essentially branches out. We ask you to talk about your existing programs. If you do have them, we want some specifics, right? Who teaches them? How many are offered in any given year? What are the students, how many students take them? What do they do with that education once they move on from your college? If you don't have any, we're going to use this section to ask for a rationale of why you want one. Again, thinking creatively, thinking expansively, and trying to figure out, you know, how it fits into your existing academic and non-academic programs. Outreach and promotion. This is incredibly important. You can have a wonderful program, wonderfully designed with faculty input, ready to go, but it really doesn't mean much of anything if you can't recruit students and participants into the program itself, right? So it's really important for any college that applies to have a sense of who your primary audiences for outreach are going to be. Who do you envision taking this course, right? And how does that relate to your typical student profile, right? Is it going to be a reach or a stretch outside of your customary student profile? And what kinds of resources within the college then is that going to take to recruit those participants into the certificate? Community partnerships. Cole and I have both been over this a little bit, but this is a space for you all to identify specifically some of your institution's key community partners. I'll say it again, I think we want you to imagine community partners pretty expansively. They don't necessarily have to be journalism or media organizations. In fact, some of you may not have them, as Cole said earlier. But who are the key community partners who've worked with your institution before that you can see being involved in the certificate program? And finally, the letter of support. So we've done this for a long time. We've done this kind of work for a long time, and we know that having support of institutional leadership is crucial for the success, both in terms of this program development, but also in terms of getting it off the ground and then hopefully sustaining it right well past the awards. And so as part of that process, we require each institution that applies to have a signed letter of support from your president's office. You will see in the application portal that we give you a template for that, so you don't have to write it yourselves. We have all of the language for it. There is a space if your president wants to add their commentary about why they think the college should be chosen. But there is a form for this, and you have to bring it into your president's office and have it signed and submitted as part of the application. This is also a good place to encourage you all to remember that we are only accepting one application per institution, right? So you see a couple of you on here from varying departments or varying centers within a single institution. You'll have to really be coordinating with each other and with the president's office to ensure that you do not have multiple applications coming to NJCH for this program. Okay, the good stuff. This is a pretty basic one, but I can tell you right now, I've seen the pitfalls before. Start your application as soon as possible. Get yourselves acquainted with the questions. I encourage you to go into Found It. I know some of you have started your applications already, so thank you for that. Bravo. If you don't have a Found It account, set one up, reach out to me. I'm happy to help you. But the sooner you get yourselves familiar with the application, the better off you're going to be. As I said, we tried not to make this too lengthy, but it does have a lot of components, including some requests for information that you're going to have to get from other places, right, in your institution. You want to allow time for that, and you want to also allow time for you to really think holistically about your application. And give yourself a day or two at least before you upload it and click send. to really think about how all of the different components are working together to tell the story of why your institution would be a good pick for this program. So start early. The application is due May 26th, but we encourage you to start as soon as possible. Review the evaluation criteria closely. The evaluation criteria are all available on the CFA page in the call for applications document. It's a PDF. We go through the entire description of the program and all of the evaluation criteria in it. When you're assembling your application, you want to also be thinking about how all of the different parts of it are speaking to the criteria that we have. And the criteria, we're going to be looking at a variety of things. We're going to be looking at, your college's suitability, your college's interest, your college's track record with community organizations, how you really work in partnership, right? Both within your institution and outside of your institution, right? You can say that you have a partnership, but how does that work in practice, right? And are you giving equal merit to the kinds of knowledge, the kinds of experience that's coming out of your community? We will also be thinking about, as we ask the advisory board to evaluate applications, geographic and institutional diversity. As I said before, there are 18 community colleges across New Jersey, some of which are in urban areas and are clustered close together, some of which are in extreme northwest corners of the state, extreme south of the state. I think particularly about institutions like Sussex or Salem, for example. We will be encouraging the advisory board to think about that geographic and institutional diversity as they make their picks for the three. So bear that in mind too. And if you think you have a reason why your particular geography needs to be served over others, put that in the application. Make sure it's in there. Make sure you have a case for it. And this is closely related to the third point, right? Like really think carefully about why your institution would be a great partner site. You have to think about all of your strengths, both your academic and non-academic, and also really think about, the possibility to continue this work beyond the award term. Ultimately, what we want out of this is to create programming that's strong enough so that, the program itself can be sustained on your campuses in one way or another, but also that, the kinds of connections that you're making with community partners are also there for the long term. Speaking of which, yeah, community, community, community. You will see it again and again in the application. We want to know who your colleges serve. We want to know who you partner with customarily. And we want you to think of this opportunity as a chance to be in community. It is an award, it's a financial award, but more than that, it's an opportunity, I think, really to be kind of on the front lines of some of the most interesting experimental work in this field and in CC. So, you need to think about what you imagine your place in that learning community to be and what you think your campus will get out of that also. And then finally, you need to think about your place in the NJCC ecosystem. Your institutions are incredibly different in terms of size, in terms of students served, and in terms of faculty expertise, right? And so you want to be thinking about what makes your school unique and what sets it apart from some of the other places that may be applying. So that's a quick rundown of some of the basics of the application. And we want to take questions from you all, since I know that you probably have a lot about how this program is going to run, what it's going to look like, and what the rest of the application process is like. So I invite you to raise your hands, and we've got a couple in the chat already. Cole, if you want to start with the ones in the chat, and then raise your hand, virtual hand, and we will go down the line.
Yeah, I just want to, I'll start with Ellen's question. Thanks, Ellen, for asking about the seed money available to the partners. And I'm not, Valerie, I think we have a pot for community partners specifically that's not a part of the 40,000 for the colleges. That is
correct. That's correct.
What's the, do we know the amount? Do we want to share it?
I think, in part, that's this seed money and how much of it goes to each institution and in what form is going to depend, as Cole and I were talking about this, is going to depend on, what comes out of your program and what your program looks like ultimately. But, there is going to be a pot of seed money aside from the 40,000 that's given to each institution for the community partners themselves to manage. And that's what's different from the money that's included in the grant that's dedicated to community partners, if that makes sense, right? The money that's included in the grant The colleges will help decide, where that money goes. These seed grants, that will be administered by the partners themselves. I guess that's probably the easiest way to explain it. What do you think, Cole?
Yeah, and I will say, that's why in the fall, I mentioned the timeline, you start to identify community partners. That's where we can, basically each college that we select in the award will apply with their partners to get, the additional funding for the partner. So we wanted to kind of figure out, okay, what are the needs there? Like what kind of partnership you're building? What does a partner need? And so that'll be a part of the process that we work on together. So the earlier that we start to think about that and identify it, the better, so we can kind of build that, build that into the funding piece. And the other thing I want to say about the partnerships too, this is an opportunity to get creative. You really don't you don't have to just partner with the newspaper or the TV station. That's great if you have one of those and you want to partner with them. There could be a local arts organization that wants to share stories from the community in a creative way, or some kind of local civic or community-based organization who's doing a lot of direct service work, who just wants to make people more informed about decisions that are happening in local government. It could really start to get creative about what that could look like, what those partnerships could be. And really just with the high level goal of how do you really increase the flow of news and information in your community, right? High quality news and information. And so, and getting more people involved in that. So that's really the goal. And I think it's really, there's a lot of opportunity there to really think about what that could look like. And it doesn't just have to be with a existing news organization. And if you want, we're happy to talk that through with you too. This is what I love doing. I know what Valerie loves doing too, is the collaborative piece and really thinking about these unique collaborations that we could forge together. So we are also down to kind of talk that through and identify folks with you.
And I should piggyback on that and say that, you are not required to have existing partnerships, right? As part of the application, we give you space to elaborate on that if you do. If you don't, there's also space in the application to sort of ask us and to say, do you want our help with identifying them, as Cole was saying? Or do you have an institution in mind, but you really are not sure how to reach out to them and you're not sure how this partnership would look? That's totally fine to say in your application. And if anything, as Cole was suggesting, I think that shows a certain potential for ingenuity and creativity in how you're imagining CC's meeting your community's info needs. Cole gave a couple of examples, but I can also say, organizations that provide public health awareness are some of the most, interesting and effective in working with communities. They understand how people get news. So organizations like that really be creative about this. I see a great question from Debbie in the chat. Debbie, thank you for asking that. So that the Philadelphia program was online. Do you have any preference between online or in-person programming? We thought about this a lot, and we had a number of conversations about this with our advisory board. I think, the Philadelphia program was run online. The Community Scribes program that we co-hosted with J&D was also online. Much of that was a function of the public health moment that we were in. But we also realized, and we've heard from all of you, that a significant number of your enrolled students have moved to all virtual courses, right? And so we want to be mindful of that, and we want to be mindful of really, the diversity of institutional offerings when it comes to online and in-person programming. And so the short answer is that we will work with each college to figure out what's going to suit your participants, your faculty best. We don't require one or the other. I see Nina's question. Could you give us some examples of local partners that have been particularly successful? Cole, do you want to take that one? I think you're really quick.
Yeah, and this is kind of building on what Valerie was just saying that I was talking about. I think so. Kind of going back to Philadelphia, we partnered again with Resolve Philadelphia. They already had a program that they paid small stipends to community members to be able to meet once a month and share ideas for topics that they should cover in their print newsletter that they were going to create, work with journalists on, and mail out to households across the city. So that was a good partner because they already kind of had a program that was people could slot into. That worked really well. There's also another program called the Documenters. So this organization called City Bureau that's based out of Chicago launched this program that's now national called Documenters, and they train and pay people to go cover public meetings. So you go through this training, then you get a stipend for each public meeting that you go cover, whether it's a city council meeting or a committee meeting or whatever it might be. So it's basically raising more awareness around local government. So that was that's a good part. Like in Cleveland, we're going to work with a local nonprofit news organization that has a Documenters program. So like folks that participate in the certificate through the college there that we work with in Cleveland can then have a role to go work with the Documenters there. In Oakland, where actually I am based in the Bay Area, we work with an arts organization. So my partner Chris Trajari is an artist, and we created basically a space called the Oakland Lowdown, and we're basically building these interactive art exhibits based on stories from the community. So that was, we actually have a space, but that partnership has worked really well because it was just a way to we actually physically put up, information in the windows and have these interactive events that people can come out and basically share their story and learn. So that's an organization that's worked really well. I think Valerie mentioned public health. There's, really thinking about back to the pandemic, right? There was a big need around how do we really make sure that we are sharing fact-based information to our community about this particular public health issue. So it could even be something as simple as there is a public health crisis, whether it be could be an addiction related thing that an organization or community is working on, that it could be a single issue. It could be around housing, it could be around access to food or whatever it might be that organization really wants to raise more awareness of, or to share more stories, or to be able to kind of make sure that people have the information that they need to make informed decisions and for the health of their families and their communities. So those are a couple different examples. I'm happy to talk more and share more if y'all have more questions on that.
I see we have a question about distribution of funding coming out of Middlesex. Thank you for these two questions, actually. So the first is on the distribution of the funding, the $40,000. Is there flexibility on the different allocations that we've laid out? So for example, using more than 10K for curriculum development and less on administrative costs. So this is tricky. I will say that as part of the application, if you've looked at it, you'll notice that we don't have a budget right in there. We do not require you to do a budget. And in part, that's because I think we don't really have a sense until we pick the institutions of exactly what the programs are going to look like, right? And so we didn't want to mandate that you would have to think about that speculatively, while you were doing the application. We just didn't think that it would be a good use of your time, your resources, and also, frankly, the reviewers' time, right? Because they would not have much to go on at this point. I think we want to roughly hew to the allocations that we've laid out, but there is going to be some flexibility, I think. You just would need to really justify why you want to move some money around in the buckets. So if you want to move more money over into that curriculum, development and faculty side, maybe you have 2 faculty members who want to be involved, and that gets into your next question. We could think about that together, but that's a conversation that we would have to have with the awarding institution. I would also say that, one reason we baked in administrative costs is because we know that they can be hefty, particularly when it comes to launching a new program, right? This is a new certificate. So we didn't want to skimp on that administrative money and leave you only with a pot, for faculty, right? I don't think that would have been realistic. The other thing that I will say about those administrative funds is that as part of that, we are asking each college to designate a certain portion of that, exact ratio up to you, towards making sure that the program is truly accessible. Now that's going to look different depending on your institution, but some examples of that may be transportation stipends for some of the participants who can't get there easily, maybe childcare stipends. All of these are the different kinds of things that have come up when we've done our own recruiting for participants in these programs. And so I think, you can't really talk about responding to a community's basic information needs and frankly, just plain basic needs if your program isn't doing that itself. So I think that was one reason why we wanted to make sure that those administrative costs are in there and that there's dedicated funding for that. The second question from Middlesex, do you envision curriculum development only by one faculty, or do you see potential collaboration between more than one faculty member? Yeah, I think this is really going to differ by institution. So many of you have really small departments. You have a small roster of faculty, and you may not be able to spare more than one faculty member be trained in this program. Others that are bigger may indeed have the person power to do more than one. So I think that that is really going to be dependent on the individual institution. And I will say that in general, we are collaboration friendly. So I think the more opportunities that you have to get more faculty trained in this, the better your chances are, I think, to sustain the program on campus. Right? So if you've got the resources to do it, I think that it would be a smart thing to do. Cool.
I was going to say interdepartmental collaboration is particularly interesting, right? Like,
Agree.
like we're a journalism organization. We work with the Humanities Council, right? I mean, that's, that we're just interested in the different ways that like you could even collaborate to really think about that curriculum together. So definitely open to that. And then I'm going to get to Teresa's question here too. And thinking creatively about community journalism, it doesn't have to be print journalism only, right? Can it involve radio, podcast, social media? 100%. One of the key things that we talk about by taking a kind of a human-centered design approach to journalism is like not to just like start with the platform, but start with the need and how people currently get their information. Like, where are people currently going to get news information about a particular issue or just about your community? And how could you basically create or think about those ways and create a response to where people are already getting their information? Because it may be the newspaper, but it may be local radio, it may be a community organization, it may be a next door group, or it may be a WhatsApp text message thread, right? So really encourage you to get creative with how you can actually share that information, share these stories, because that's really important. And I think a lot of times we kind of, as journalists will default to like thinking about news as like a newspaper, but news can be anything, right? So we really appreciate that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've seen it come up over and over again in the programming that we've done. I think we're really interested in like learning more about where communities are finding their info, right? I think that's part of the goal of this program, because in a lot of cases we just don't know, right? As Cole said. And I can tell you that this, the importance of trying to figure out where people are getting their news and where they already are. I'm just coming off of a local news summit down in Virginia, where I had the chance to talk a little bit about this program. And one of the topics of conversation that was really, at the head for everyone was this issue of like, what's the relationship between print news and all of these other different media that we're seeing proliferate? And is there space for both? And what are the different, opportunities for both business-wise, sustainability-wise, and well into the future? So it's a great question. Other questions? I believe we've tackled everything in the chat. Does anyone have any other questions? Raise your hand. You can call in. Okay, well, thank you for coming to today's session. I hope that you found it useful and informative. Cole alluded to this earlier, but both of us really enjoy talking with potential program participants. So if you have questions about the application, if you have questions about the program, please do reach out to us, and we will make the time to talk through various parts of it with you. Office hours are a really important step, I think, in making these kinds of applications accessible. So we're really committed to that. Always happy to talk to you, to answer whatever questions you have. And please do try to get your applications in by the deadline. We would love to see a range of applications, right, from institutions all around the state. So I really encourage you to think about your campus, think about what it offers to this kind of program, and to apply for this chance to get you some money.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all joining.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Thank
all of
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.